Welcome to True Echo, where the stories you hear are more than just words. They're reflections of the real world, of injustice faced and dignity reclaimed. Today's story is one of quiet strength, painful truth, and a moment that shook an entire room to its core. One woman, one refusal, one revelation that changed everything. What you're about to hear will stay with you long after the last word. My name is Calvin Baines. I'm 46 years old. And this is the story of how my mother, a retired federal judge, taught an entire restaurant the meaning of respect without saying more than a few soft-spoken words. It was a humid Thursday in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of day where the air feels thick and molasses slow. Tourists swirled down River Street, chasing shade and cold drinks. But a few blocks away, beneath a canopy of flowering magnolia trees, something else was brewing. Not a storm. Not a protest. Something quieter, yet no less powerful. My mother, Clara Baines, was never one for grand entrances. She believed in dignity, not drama. So when she stepped into Harper's, a polished southern restaurant known for its white linen tablecloths and silent service, she didn't expect trouble. She certainly didn't expect humiliation. She wore her powder blue Sunday dress, the one she reserved for church or the occasional city council event. On her feet were low white heels, polished with care, and in her hand she held my father's old fedora. That hat never left her side. It was as much a part of her as her silver-pinned hair or her quiet grace. She paused just inside the doors, letting her eyes adjust. The restaurant was half full, not even close to capacity. But to the young man at the hostess stand, none of that mattered. Jeremy Landon. Early 20s. Sandy hair slicked back in that smug way that always seems to come with entitlement. The second he saw her, he made a decision. One he'd regret by the end of the hour. He didn't smile. Didn't greet her. Didn't even pretend to check the reservation list. Just lied. Said the restaurant was booked for a private event. Told her to leave. And when she gently reminded him of her reservation, one I'd made myself, he doubled down. Loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. There were empty tables. At least 6. But Jeremy didn't see a customer. He saw an old black woman he assumed didn't belong. My mother didn't argue. She stood with that quiet kind of defiance, the kind built from years of being unseen in all the wrong places. A few diners watched. Most stayed silent. One woman at the bar offered her a seat. Mama smiled, declined, and said she'd wait for her son. That son was me. And when I walked through that door, late, I admit, I knew something was wrong before she said a word. I've spent my career in corporate law. I've sat in boardrooms with billionaires and argued with men who thought owning the world meant owning the truth. But the look on my mother's face that day, it undid me. The hat in her hands. The way her back was just a little straighter than usual. The silence of the restaurant so thick it rang. Jeremy saw me and his entire demeanor shifted. That's the thing about people like him. Respect isn't something they offer freely. It's a calculation. A price tag. And when he saw the Rolex on my wrist, the briefcase in my hand, suddenly there was room in the restaurant. Suddenly we mattered. But Mama? She never needed him to see her the way I did. She just needed him to see her at all. And when I finally said her name, Clara Baines, his face drained of color. Because even in his ignorance something clicked. Something shifted. She wasn't just some old woman. She was one of the first black women to serve as a federal judge in Georgia. She'd helped shape the very laws that allowed Jeremy to work freely and deny her with a straight face. And now the room couldn't unsee what it had ignored. The silence that followed my mother's name wasn't just uncomfortable, it was seismic. It was the kind of silence that rearranged people's thoughts, rewired their instincts. Forks froze midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. And for the first time that day, every eye in that polished restaurant truly saw the woman in blue. Clara Baines. My mother. Judge Baines, to anyone with a sliver of history or dignity in their veins. Jeremy's eyes bounced between me and her like a man trying to escape a sinking ship he didn't know he was on until the floorboards cracked. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered, the bravado all gone now, replaced by the same nervous energy I'd seen in young lawyers who realized too late they were out of their depth. But I didn't come to argue with a boy. I came to take my mother to lunch. And yet, I couldn't just let it go. Not entirely. Not when the entire room had watched this unfold like it was a scene from a play they weren't responsible for. The injustice hadn't been subtle. It had been loud, public, and dressed in denial. My mother, I said, voice steady, eyes sweeping the room, was told there was no room here. Told to try somewhere else. That's not just a mistake. That's a decision. Jeremy flushed. I let the words hang there, not because I wanted to shame him, but because I needed the room to understand this wasn't about a reservation. It was about who they thought mattered. Clara touched my arm gently. That signal we both knew. Don't make a scene. But this wasn't a scene. It was a mirror. I just held it up. The manager, a short woman in a dark green dress, headset still tucked behind her ear, had been inching closer. Now she rushed over with the politeness of panic, all apologies and flustered energy. "We are so sorry, Judge Baines," she began. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. Please allow us to seek you immediately." Clara said nothing. She didn't need to. We were led to the private room through two heavy oak doors. But not before I turned once more to Jeremy, whose eyes were locked on the floor like they might offer escape. "I hope," I said quietly, "you think about who you serve and why you serve them." His jaw worked like he wanted to say something. But no words came. The room beyond the doors was bright and warm, filled with the low hum of conversation and the soft clatter of silverware on china. A banner stretched across the far wall, celebrating the legacy of Judge Clara Baines. I'd helped organize the luncheon, pulled strings, called in favors. Not because Mama asked me to, she would never, but because I knew what she meant to so many. And how often the world forgets the women who built it. Colleagues, mints, city officials, all had gathered to honor her. A table near the front held framed photographs. Mama marching in heels in 1968, her first gavel in hand, a shot of her and my late father standing on courthouse steps. And in the center of it all, her smile. That same quiet smile she carried now. She took her seat at the head table. I sat beside her, proud and boiling. "I'm okay, baby," she said as if reading my thoughts. "You shouldn't have to be," I muttered. She only reached for Walter's hat and laid it gently beside her plate, smoothing the brim with fingers that had written history into law. People began to speak, one by one, sharing stories of cases she'd won, barriers she'd broken, lessons she'd passed down. Each voice rang with reverence. But I knew none of them really knew. Not the way I did. Not about the days she sat on the porch waiting for a taxi that never came. Or the nights she scrubbed the smell of a day's humiliation off her skin before tucking me in. The world called her a pioneer. I called her Mama. And I knew the cost. But she never told those stories. She wore them, like armor, like memory etched into her bones. When her turn came to speak, she rose slowly. Her back straight, her eyes shining. She didn't touch the mic, didn't need it. Her voice filled the space with a calm that cut deeper than thunder. "I'm grateful for this honor," she began. "But please understand, it's not about awards. It's not about the gavel or the bench or even the banner behind me. It's about what you do for people who can do nothing for you." The room stilled. I saw jaws slacken. Eyebrows twitch with recognition. "It's about kindness," she continued. "About courage. About choosing to see someone, really see them, when the world tells you to look away." And just like that, the same silence that once shamed her now honored her. After the applause, after the smiles and pictures and polite bites of cake, we sat by the window, iced tea in hand. The sun casting long golden streaks on the brick sidewalk outside. "You all right, Mama?" I asked. She nodded. "Been all right a long time," she said, though her eyes lingered somewhere far off. And I knew what she was thinking. Not about the party. Not about the words. About Jeremy. About what happened on the other side of those oak doors. "He might change," I offered, half hopeful. She smiled, a smile that held all the wisdom I would never quite catch up to. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not. But the important thing is what he does next, when nobody's watching." We sat a little longer. Comfortable in the kind of silence that doesn't need fixing. Then footsteps. The steps grew louder, slow and hesitant, like each one was asking permission to exist. We turned our heads toward the doorway just as Jeremy Landon emerged from the shadows of the main dining room. He wasn't wearing his usual smirk. His hands were buried deep in his slacks, and for the first time since we'd seen him, his gaze was focused, not on my watch, not on the clientele, not even on my mother's dress, but on the floor. He stopped just short of our table, barely 5 feet away. He looked smaller somehow, as if the air around him had grown too heavy to carry. The room behind him buzzed with new conversations, but in that little corner, time went still. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough like it hadn't been used for honesty in a while. "I judged you. I shouldn't have. I'm really sorry." My mother didn't blink. Didn't flinch. She studied him in silence, not with disdain, not even with disappointment, but with that quiet kind of curiosity that comes when you're deciding whether someone's regret is real or just convenient. Then she smiled. Not wide but real. "Thank you," she said. Just 2 words. She didn't lecture. Didn't explain why his behavior was wrong. Didn't offer him a story about her past to teach him a lesson. Because she knew. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone sit in their discomfort and choose what to do with it. Jeremy gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, turned, and disappeared back into the restaurant. He didn't look back. I glanced at my mother. Her face was peaceful, the tension from earlier gone, replaced by something deeper. She'd always believed in grace. But grace wasn't weakness. It was choice. Intentional. Radical. We stood together, slowly. The weight of the afternoon had settled into our bones, but there was no heaviness in our steps. As we reached the front door, the sun poured through the glass like it was trying to offer an apology of its own. Outside the world looked the same. Magnolia leaves danced in the breeze. Tourists snapped pictures of steamboats drifting down the river. But something had shifted, subtle, invisible, but undeniably real. And there, on the sidewalk, was the older woman from the bar. The one who'd offered my mother a seat when no one else did. She stepped forward as we passed, wringing her hands. "I just wanted to say," she began, her voice soft and strained. "I should have said more. I should have stood up. I'm sorry." Mama reached out, took the woman's hand gently, and gave it a light squeeze. "You said plenty, dear," she replied. "You offered kindness when others offered nothing. That's what matters." The woman blinked fast, nodded once, then turned and walked quickly away, shoulders trembling. As I opened the car door and helped Mama inside, I caught her looking back at the restaurant one last time. Not with bitterness. Not even with triumph. Just reflection. She laid Walter's old hat on her lap, folded her hands over it, and looked out the window. "You always find a way to forgive," I said as I slid into the driver's seat. She chuckled lightly, the sound low and full. "Forgiveness isn't about pretending something didn't happen," she said. "It's about refusing to let it harden you." I started the engine. The old cobbled streets of Savannah stretched ahead, winding like veins through a city that still hadn't figured out what it owed the people who built it. "You know," she added, running her fingers along the brim of the hat, "I spent too many years fighting to be seen to start carrying bitterness now. That's not the legacy I want to leave." And I believed her. Because I had seen her legacy. It wasn't in law books or plaques on courtroom walls. It was in the quiet way she carried herself when no one clapped. When no one saw. When someone like Jeremy thought they could erase her with a sentence. That's what strength looked like. And somehow I knew. Jeremy would remember it too. We drove in silence for a while, the kind of silence that heals, not wounds. Mama rested her head back and closed her eyes, just for a moment. And I thought about something she once told me when I was a teenager and came home after being called a name I'll never forget. She didn't say, "Ignore it." She didn't say, "Be the bigger person." She said, "Let them look. Let them stare. Just make sure they're seeing the real you." I never forgot that. And today I saw the world look at her. And this time they saw. We didn't say much for the next few blocks. Savannah streets whispered under the tires, old oak trees casting slow-moving shadows across the car hood. Mama watched the world pass outside the window, people walking dogs, sipping iced tea on porch swings, kids chasing each other through sprinklers. It was a peaceful afternoon. But I could tell her mind was still inside that restaurant, somewhere between the sting of being dismissed and the quiet applause of being honored. "Do you think it made a difference?" I asked finally, keeping my eyes on the road. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft. "Maybe. Maybe not. But that's not the point, baby." "Then what is?" She turned her head slightly, just enough so I could catch the reflection of her calm in the side mirror. "The point is what comes after. What sticks. The real test isn't how they act in front of me next time. It's what they do when I'm not there." That hit me harder than I expected. Because it wasn't just about Jeremy. It wasn't just about some awkward waiter at a fancy restaurant. It was about every moment we look away. Every time we decide not to speak. Every small, unnoticed choice that either builds a better world, or lets it crack. The next day, I received a phone call from someone I didn't expect. The restaurant manager, Caroline Mendoza. Her voice was low, professional, but tinged with the exhaustion of someone who'd spent the night replaying their failures. "Mr. Baines," she began, "I wanted to apologize for what happened yesterday. It was unacceptable. I've spoken to Jeremy and it won't happen again." "Will he be fired?" I asked, maybe a little too sharply. There was a pause. "We're handling it internally," she said, a diplomatic dodge. "He's being retrained and we're reviewing our diversity and sensitivity protocols." I didn't press. Because truth be told, I didn't care about Jeremy's job. I cared about what he learned, and whether anyone in that building would ever look at a woman like my mother the same way again. "Listen," I said finally. "You should know something. My mother didn't want me to make a scene. She didn't want to punish anyone. But if you want to do right by her, next time someone walks through those doors, someone who doesn't look like your regular crowd, see them." Another pause. Then, "Yes, sir." That was it. No fanfare. No promises. Just silence. That evening I stopped by my mother's house. She was out back, tending to her roses with a straw hat shielding her from the sun and a pair of gardening gloves that had seen better decades. I watched her for a moment before she noticed me, her shoulders hunched slightly, not from weakness but from years of bearing the weight of a world that made her earn every inch. "Hey, Calvin," she said without turning. "You come to steal some lemonade or borrow a little wisdom?" "Maybe both," I said grinning. She chuckled. "Well, you better pour it yourself. And bring me a glass while you're at it." We sat on the back porch, glasses sweating in the heat. The cicadas sang their late summer anthem from the trees, and Mama leaned back with a content sigh. "You know," she said after a while, "there was a time I'd have let that moment ruin me. Would have gone home, cried into Walter's shirt, maybe never gone back to a place like that again. But not anymore?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I'm too old and too proud to let someone like that steal my seat at the table. Literally or otherwise." I thought about that. About the idea of seats, of tables, of who gets invited and who gets asked to leave. About how many rooms she had to walk into with her chin up and her heart armored just to get to one that celebrated her. "That's why I stayed standing," she said after a pause. "In the restaurant?" I asked. She nodded. "It wasn't defiance. It was presence. Sometimes, when the world doesn't want to see you, the bravest thing you can do is simply be seen." Later that night as I drove home I passed Harper's. The lights inside were low, the last of the dinner crowd slowly filtering out. Through the tall windows I saw a busboy wiping down a table, a hostess stacking menus, and, at the very back, Jeremy. He wasn't smirking. He looked tired. Maybe thoughtful. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Because some lessons aren't about confrontation. Some are about quiet echoes that keep ringing after the applause fades. And I knew somehow that Jeremy would never forget her name again. It wasn't the media that reached out first. It was a law student. 3 days after the luncheon, I found a handwritten letter in my mailbox at the firm. A rarity in the age of emails and tweets. The envelope was plain. No return address. Inside was a sheet of lined paper, neatly folded. The writing was tidy, precise, and the message brief. "Dear Mr. Baines, I was at the back of the restaurant that day. I didn't say anything. I didn't stand up. I just watched. And I've never been more ashamed of my silence. But your mother changed something in me. I've decided to pursue civil rights law because of her. I just thought you should know. Sincerely, a future voice who will speak up." I sat at my desk for a long time after reading that. The noise of phones ringing, heels tapping on hardwood, conversations swirling around me, it all faded. I just stared at the letter, stunned by how something as simple as a quiet refusal to back down could ripple outward into someone else's future. That's what Mama never bragged about, how her presence, her grace, could shake the world without raising her voice. I showed her the letter that evening. She read it in silence, then folded it with care like it was a sacred artifact. "Another seed planted," she said, smiling to herself. "Let's hope it grows." But it wasn't just one letter. By the end of the week there were dozens. Emails from young lawyers, messages from community leaders, even a voicemail from a woman in Alabama who said she saw a clip of the luncheon on someone's Instagram story and played it 3 times just to let Clara's words soak into her bones. The internet had done its thing even though none of us intended it to. Someone had recorded her speech, just the last minute of it, and shared it online. No filters. No captions. Just her voice, steady and clear. It's not about awards. It's about what you do for the people who can do nothing for you. It's about seeing people. Really seeing them. That 60-second clip had been reposted hundreds of times in just a few days. And while Mama didn't care much for social media, she couldn't ignore the ripple. "You're going viral," I teased her. She swatted my arm. "I don't even know what that means. I'm not a cold." But I could tell, beneath her playful annoyance, she was moved. Deeply. Not by the attention but by the response. The awakening. The reflection it sparked in people who'd never heard her name before that moment. And then came the twist. One I didn't see coming. A week after the luncheon, Jeremy Landon knocked on the door of my office. No appointment. No warning. My assistant poked her head in, eyes wide. "There's a young man here. Says he met your mother?" He stepped in, hat in his hands, ironic considering how Mama had carried Walter's like armor. He was dressed different. No tie. Just a plain shirt and khakis. He looked like someone who'd stopped pretending. "I know I'm not supposed to be here," he said quickly, "and I understand if you want me to leave. But I needed to talk to someone who knows her." I didn't speak. Just nodded for him to sit. He lowered himself into the chair slowly, like it was heavier than it should have been. His shoulders slumped, hands clenched. He looked younger than I remembered. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he began. "I've talked to my dad, a lot. And I found out something I didn't know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. I think your mother knew my grandfather." I leaned forward. The photo was black and white. A courtroom. A protest march. My mother standing between two men in suits, holding a clipboard. One of them looked just like Jeremy. A little older, but the resemblance was there. "My grandfather was a public defender," he explained. "Worked pro bono for civil rights cases. He never talked about it much, but that's him." I took the photo from him, studying my mother's face in it, determined, younger, but unmistakably her. "He used to say this one woman made him rethink everything," Jeremy continued. "Said she reminded him that justice isn't about who wins. It's about who's seen." He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I think that woman was your mom." And for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Because sometimes history loops around. Sometimes the people we wrong carry the weight of our ancestors' better angels. And sometimes we're lucky enough to see it before it's too late. "Do you want to tell her?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. I think it means more if she never knows I figured it out. That I just choose better. Because of her." I nodded. "Then do that," I said. "That's all she's ever wanted." He stood, tucked the photo back in his pocket and left. And in the silence he left behind, I realized something. This wasn't just a story about a rude waiter. It was a story about legacy, about how we carry the names of those before us and shape the names of those after us. Mama hadn't just fought to be seen. She'd made sure others would never be unseen again. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I found Mama in the den, reading a worn paperback, her glasses perched low on her nose. The news had caught up with her by then. One of the local reporters who'd been at the luncheon had run a piece. Small column, community section, but honest and clear. Judge Clara Baines still teaching us what justice looks like. She didn't make a fuss. Didn't read it out loud or call me to come see. She just turned the page of her book like it was any other day. But I saw the way she paused at the word justice when she glanced down at the newspaper folded beside her. "You know," she said suddenly, "Walter always told me I had a way of embarrassing people into doing better without ever raising my voice." I chuckled. "You embarrassed half of Savannah into self-reflection last week." She smiled, then grew quiet. "But it's not about embarrassment, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about reflection. And how rare it is for someone to offer a mirror when the world hands out blindfolds." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "That's the difference, baby. Some people talk about justice like it's an award. But the real kind is lived. Quietly. Daily. In places where no one's clapping." She picked up the article again, running a finger slowly down the lines. "You know what surprised me?" "What?" "That they called me a legacy." Her voice was soft, uncertain. "I never thought of myself like that." "You are," I said. "To a lot more people than you realize." 3 days later, a letter arrived from the Georgia State Bar Association. It was addressed to the Honorable Clara L. Baines, and marked confidential. I watched as she read it, mouth slightly open in disbelief. "What is it?" I asked. "They're naming a scholarship fund after me," she whispered. "For minority students pursuing law. Full ride. Mentorship program. Public interest focus." Her eyes misted, but she blinked it back. They said, "It was inspired by my unshakable grace and silent strength in the face of injustice." She handed the letter to me, and I read every word slowly, carefully, like I was holding a piece of our family's DNA. It wasn't just about Mama. It was about every door she walked through alone so others wouldn't have to. Every courtroom where her voice wasn't heard until it was. Every chair she wasn't offered until she took it. And now that name, Clara Baines, would be etched into the future of a profession that once treated her like a ghost. A few days later we were invited back to Harper's. A different tone this time. The manager had changed, Caroline had been let go quietly. A new woman, Maritza Delgado, had taken over. Young. Black. Boys. First-generation Cuban-American. She greeted Mama with a hug and a quiet thank you. No speeches. No cameras. Just a table perfectly set by the window. Jeremy wasn't there. But something else was. A new plaque had been mounted near the front entrance. I almost missed it until Mama gently tapped my shoulder and pointed. Read. We honor all who walk through these doors with dignity and respect. In recognition of Judge Clara Baines, who reminded us that true service begins with seeing each person as they are. She didn't say anything. Just stood there for a moment, her hand resting on the brim of Walter's hat. We were seated by the magnolia-draped windows and the staff, diverse, calm, aware, moved with an energy that felt different. Not performative. Not panicked. Just present. When our server approached, he didn't ask if we needed anything. He asked her name. And that, more than any apology, meant everything. We finished lunch quietly. No fanfare. Just soft jazz and sweet tea and the distant hum of a city still trying to learn from its elders. As we walked out, Mama paused by the plaque again. You think people will notice it? She asked. They will, I said. Even if they don't stop to read it, they'll feel it. She nodded. Because legacy isn't just in what you leave behind. It's in what you change while you're still here. It was weeks later when I saw the moment Mama had been waiting for, not on the news, not on a stage, but in a grocery store. We'd stopped by the local market one Saturday morning. Nothing dramatic. Just a short list. Greens, flour, canned peaches, and that special brand of mint tea she liked that only one store carried. We moved through the aisles like any other Saturday, me pushing the cart, her reading every label like it held a secret code. At checkout, a young woman behind us kept glancing over. She was in her early 20s, maybe a college student. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a small basket with ramen, tampons, and a box of granola bars. I offered to let her go ahead of us, but she shook her head quickly and stepped closer to Mama. Excuse me, she said softly. Are you Judge Baines? Mama turned, surprised. Yes, I am. The girl took a breath, held it, then let it out slow. My mom used to talk about you, she said. She worked at the courthouse. Said you treated everyone like they mattered, like they already mattered, not like they had to earn it. Mama's smile was quiet, but it reached her eyes. She said when she cleaned your office, you always left her a note. Thank you, Miss Carla. She kept them in a shoebox. I remember your mother, Mama said. She was a good woman. Always humming. She passed away last year, the girl said, voice cracking slightly. But I'm in law school now. Second year. I just wanted you to know, she used to say the world was a little less lonely because of you. I watched Mama's hand reach out, not to pat the girl's shoulder or offer comfort, but to hold her hand. Firm. Present. You keep going, she told the young woman. The world needs more people who know what loneliness feels like, so they'll never let someone else sit in it. The girl nodded, eyes glistening, then stepped away. She didn't need a photo. Didn't need a signature. The moment itself was enough. As we walked to the car, I looked over at Mama. She was quiet again, but I knew the quiet this time wasn't grief or anger. It was peace. You know, I said, opening the passenger door, I used to think legacy was something you built with effort. With plans. With strategy. She laughed as she sat down. And now I think, it's what happens when you live like every moment matters. Like every person matters. She gave a small nod, eyes on the horizon as I started the car. It's not about the courtroom, she said. Or the title. It's about how you treat the ones no one else notices. Later that evening, as the sky bled pink across Savannah's rooftops, Mama sat on the porch with Walter's hat in her lap, humming a song I didn't recognize. I sat beside her, just listening. She turned to me after a while. You know, Calvin, I used to think the hardest part of growing old was being forgotten. And now I know it's realizing you were seen all along, just not by the ones who needed to see you the most. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached for her hand. And we sat as the world darkened gently around us, leaving the porch light on, not for us but for whoever might come after, needing to find their way. Some stories don't end with headlines or cheers. They end quietly, with someone being seen finally for who they truly are. Clara Baines didn't change the world by shouting. She changed it by standing, waiting, smiling, and reminding us that dignity is not something to be given, but something to be recognized. It's not about titles. It's about how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Let this story be a mirror. Look into it, share it, and ask yourself, are you choosing to see? If this story moved you, subscribe to True Echo, where real stories of redemption, courage, and legacy come alive. Leave a comment with the name of someone who changed your life by simply seeing you. Share this video if you believe the quietest voices often carry the loudest truths.